will continue to follow. Meanwhile, Boeing's blunders are not the only source of potential danger across the airline. The Mountain States Legal Foundation is now suing the federal government over what they are calling discriminatory hiring practices in the FAA and the Department of Transportation. I'm pleased to say joining us now is the Mountain States Legal Foundation General Counsel, Will Trachman. Talk to me about the basis of your lawsuit.
Well, we represent over 900 would-be air traffic controllers who initially took a pre-employment test, and they passed with flying colors. Many of them got 100% on the test. But after they took the test and passed it, the FAA decided that the hiring pool of potential air traffic controllers was too white. And so they flushed that test. Our clients' passing scores went away. And then our clients, over 900 of them, failed the new test, which we believe is racially gerrymandered to racially balance the hiring pool and create more minorities in that pool for hiring air traffic controllers.
William, Brian, Taylor, and I have had this conversation on the show many times. You need to have the best person that is qualified for the job performing it when you're dealing with professions that are dealing with people's lives, whether it's an operating table or, operating a plane in the sky. These are serious issues. Should you win this lawsuit, how long does it take to actually implement policies that will reverse what the FAA has done here?
Well, I wish the belief that you expressed weren't so radical in the Biden administration. They seem to be obsessed with race and gender and not doing what's best for the country and not caring more about merit. Once we win, we think it'll be nearly immediate. We are suing both for retrospective relief and also prospective relief to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And we want to create a deterrent to ensure that the FAA plays by the rules, both legally and on behalf of American safety. It's not just illegal. It's actually courting danger to hire someone who's not the best person for the job.
William, if you win here, it's going to have an effect on a government agency, the FAA, but will the victory also set a precedent that will matter for private companies where this sort of thing might be going on as well?
That's a great question. So we're suing under Title VII, which is part of the Federal Civil Rights Act, and it bars race discrimination in employment. So it applies to government employers. It applies to private employers. So once we win this case, it'll apply just as much to private corporations like Boeing, like Airbus, throughout the aviation industry. And Title VII is the precedent that says you can't discriminate when you hire, promote, or retain employees. And that's the principle we have to go with here.
William, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And it was interesting. One of my questions to him was going to be, does it impact Boeing? And he answered it, where he said that that could trickle down into companies like Boeing, which I know we've had some concerns about the safety issues, and we don't know if there is a cause or a correlation to the push in DEI, but something maybe that people are looking into.
This is such a big deal. I mean, if he wins, if they win here, it could sort of reset the stage for how a lot of companies are and have been navigating this whole space of categorical hiring. And it could be so good if the private sector is just freed of this thing and we get back to competency.
So look at what we just talked about, the span. We talked about universities and education. We talked about government and the State Department. We're talking about federal agencies with the FAA. The DEI movement, if you want to call it that, is so widespread. But Taylor, to the point you made earlier and what you're talking about now, Brian, I actually think private businesses have started to reject it because they realize there's not much appetite for it out there, and that there's a certain amount of diversity and inclusion that, we need to have in the world that we live in order to function, but that you can't, as William is saying here, you can't hire based on those practices. You can't reverse discriminate based on those practices, because ultimately there's a huge cost to be paid.
Well, we always talk about California, like what happens in California moves to the rest of the country. What happens in the government often moves to the private sector. So stopping it there can be really positive in that regard.
Yeah, really interesting stuff.